the I'm just trying to get the chat to appear on the side. So hi everyone, my name's Andy Walker, as you've probably gathered by now. Hopefully this will work. If we can try and save questions till the end, that would probably be preferable, yep. Just because I might answer your question as I'm going, but if not, then yeah, let's try and get some questions at the end. I was hoping to rattle off some photos and pictures for this tour, for this talk. Basically, it's going to be covering the area of Eastern Australia, and you can see from these slides that hopefully you can see. I'm still trying to get the chat to show on my screen, but it doesn't seem to want to at the moment.
So we are seeing the map of Australia and the arrow pointing towards it.
So you can see how far away Australia is approximately from Arizona. It's about 12,000 kilometers, so it's about 7,450 miles approximately to that part of Australia there, which is almost Brisbane, where the arrow is pointing. So this talk is based on 2 tours that I run basically to Australia. And one of those tours is to Tasmania, and it's 6-day tour. And the second one is the East Coast tour, and that covers Victoria, southern New South Wales, and Queensland, and we do the south, and then the north of Queensland. So to give you an idea of the size of Australia, that's Australia overlaid over a map of the United States. And so you can see it's a pretty big place. The biggest problem that most people have is actually underestimating Australia and trying to do too much in one go, as I shall probably show you in this talk by probably trying to talk about too much in one go. But you'll get the idea. It's a big place. Australia has, here's just some facts and figures, basically 977 birds. That's according to the IOC taxonomy that I follow and Birding Ecotours follows. Clements actually has it as a few more species than that, I believe, somehow. And of those, about 360 species are endemic birds to Australia, several endemic families as well. And of the rest of the species, the vast majority of those are actually restricted to Australasia, Indonesia, New Guinea, New Zealand, and some of the little offshore islands. So a lot of the birds are very restricted range on a global context. Loads of mammals, 378 species of land mammals, and most of those are endemic. There's a lot of introduced species, but the vast majority of them are endemic. 50 species of marine mammals, 950 species of reptiles. It's absolutely phenomenal place if you like reptiles. There's a lot of reptiles to see. 4,000 fish, and there's lots of interesting freshwater fish in the forest streams, but then out on the reef as well. Off the East Coast, there's some amazing sea fish, reef fish, as we'll dive into those, if you pardon the pun, later. So I've already mentioned we're going to go to Tasmania, Victoria, New South Wales, and Queensland. So where is that? That is this section of the map here. Hopefully you can still see my slides. And yeah, so the north to south, we're going to cover about 4,000 kilometers. So that's about 2,500 miles approximately, and 1,000 kilometers east to west, which is about 620 miles approximately. This is the rough area that we're going to talk about on this talk. So first off, we're going to hit Tasmania right at the bottom there. Very nice climate, Tasmania. It's snows in the winter and it's warm in the summer, but it's not crazy hot like the interior of Australia. So this is a crazy hot day in Tasmania. It's beautiful beaches, nice view looking out onto the Southern Ocean, which doesn't look like this all the time. But we're going to go and look for our first bird. It's hooded dotterel, one of the endemic shorebirds of Australia. And then we're going to see Pacific gull as well. This part of Australia is very, very good for seabirds and Southern Ocean birds. Little penguin breeds down there, one of the world's smallest penguin. Fairly common, but has decreased massively, unfortunately, due to issues with dogs, pet dogs, foxes, feral cats, that kind of thing, can wipe a colony out, unfortunately, in no time at all. But while we're here, we're going to go and have a look out at sea, because you've got to go and do a pelagic trip when you're in the south of Australia. There's loads of seabirds out here, and you can have some absolutely phenomenal experiences. This is a wandering albatross, and similar to the wandering albatross, some more large albatrosses we can get down here. This is Antipodean albatross. Southern royal albatross, it's another big one. Northern royal albatross. Those four species are absolutely huge, and if you see one of the smaller mollymawks or albatrosses, you think they're big, and then one of these four flies in and they just absolutely dwarf the smaller albatross, which dwarf everything else that's out there as well. It's an incredible sight. Moving along with some of the smaller albatross, black-browed albatross, fairly well-known global wanderer. Similar is Campbell albatross. It has this honey-coloured eye that you can hopefully pick out in the photo here. That's one of the identifying features. Probably the most abundant albatross in Australian waters is the shy albatross. This actually is a local breeder, and it breeds on some of the little islands off Tasmania. So you do see it all around the south. And it's probably the most frequently observed from the shore. So yeah, you do see that one from sea watching points in southern Australia. A little bit more colourful maybe is the Indian yellow-nosed albatross. You can see the yellow just going through the bill there on the top. And a similar species, but much more uncommon, is the Buller's albatross. You can see it's got yellow on the top, but then it's also got yellow on the bottom of the bill. This is an absolutely stunning albatross. Really, it's probably the favourite of the ones that I've seen down there. It's not that commonly seen. Easier in New Zealand, really, but you do see it off Australia. Almost as big, actually, as the albatross, and quite a bully, often seen fighting with them. Northern giant petrel. This is a huge seabird. And then some of the smaller petrels that are sporadic with their occurrence, they always create a bit of excitement when you're out on the boat. This is a Cape petrel. Really unique plumage on that one, quite a widespread seabird. White-headed petrel, this is a rarity off the south coast. Grey-faced petrel. This one's fairly heavily in wing molt by the look of it. One of the commoner ones off southwest Australia, but does come across to the southeast occasionally as well, soft plumaged petrel. And then great winged petrel. And then one of the most abundant birds on some trips can be fairy prion. These birds can get into rafts of hundreds or thousands of birds, and it's quite impressive. And you have to search through them, because some of the rarer prions sometimes get in with them. And I've picked up things like broad-billed prion and slender-billed prion in amongst these flocks. So it's always worth checking through them. Storm petrels are about as well. A white-faced storm petrel is probably a fairly widespread global species. And then two of the tiny little things, size of swallows basically. Wilson's storm petrel, which is on the left, and grey-backed storm petrel is on the right, and I presume that your viewing screen is the same as mine actually. So if it's got a logo next to it, that's the grey-backed storm petrel, and the one without the logo on is Wilson storm petrel. These are tiny, tiny little birds. Really, really cool to watch.
And Andy, it is good. It's showing up really well.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah, good. I'm glad someone's there. So yeah, we're gonna just head back onto the land now, and we're going to take a little bit of a journey down to the southwest corner of Tasmania. This is one of my favourite places in Tasmania. It's called Melaleuca. It's in the southwest tip of Tasmania, and this is pretty remote. You've got to either fly in a light aircraft and land on a little tin airstrip, an old tin mine airstrip, or you hike in, and it's I think it's like a 60-kilometer hike through pretty inhospitable grounds. There used to be an indigenous tribe living down here, and there's still examples of how they used to go about their life down here. They were fishing essentially in this landscape, and the story goes, the legend goes that the men used to send the women out to go fish because it was considered too dangerous for the men to go out fishing. So a little bit of an unusual situation down there. But it is incredibly remote. The reason we go down here, you're in this amazing heathland habitat out there, rolling hills. We're looking for one bird, the orange-bellied parrot. So this bird is one of the rarest birds in the world. It's unfortunately, it is getting close to becoming extinct in the wild. There's probably only about 50 of them left in the world, probably less in the wild. So it's critically endangered. It's a migratory parrot, so it breeds in southwest Tasmania, around the Melaleuca area, and then it flies across the Tasman Sea, which is one of the roughest crossings there is, and it overwinters in southern Australia, so in the south of Victoria, and previously into South Australia. So basically the coast between Adelaide and Melbourne. Many of them don't make that journey, and each year the population is getting less and less. This bird, unfortunately, is on the way out. There's been a lot of work gone into the conservation of this species. It's not gone very well, to be honest, by the sound of it. So we've probably only got a few years left for this species, unfortunately. And another parrot, unfortunately, is going the same way. This is the swift parrot. This is also a migratory parrot, breeds in Tasmania, but this one it overwinters further north into Australia, all the way up to, say, Brisbane, for example, on the eastern side. These are both very, very small parrots, not very big at all. They travel a long way. This one, the pressure on this one is the issue with the breeding grounds. There's introduced species in Tasmania, for example, possums, and they will eat the eggs, eat the young, take over the nesting holes. There's a lot of deforestation still going on in Australia, and that's another problem for the swift parrots. So they're both critically endangered birds. There are other endangered birds, as we'll go through on this talk, and I'll point them out. One bird that's not endangered, it's very common across most of Australia, is the spotted pardalote. And you often get very good views of them in Tasmania, along with its cousin, the striated pardalote. That's also fairly common and fairly widespread across most of Australia. Both of those two birds have different subspecies across its range. So if you've been to Australia, you may have seen them and they may have looked a little bit different. That's why. The main pardalote we look for when we're in Tasmania may not look so great compared to the other two. This is a 40 spotted pardalote, and this bird is also critically endangered. There's probably only a couple of hundred of these left and they're really restricted to the area around Hobart, which is the capital of Tasmania, and Bruny Island, which is a little island off Tasmania. These birds, all three of them are eucalypt specialists. They eat the little I don't know what the names of them are, the little things on the eucalyptus leaves, so they're peeling them off, and there's a lot of competition amongst the pardalotes. They'll all bully each other. Honey eaters as well are very territorial, and they will chase them off, and this bird is also in decline drastically. One of the conservation bodies on Bruny Island is putting up nesting boxes, because they're hole nesters, so putting up nesting boxes, and they are actually helping. But it's one of the Tasmanian endemics we look for when we're in Tasmania. Not so difficult to see. The Tasmanian native hen. This is a giant native hen, flightless bird, bigger than your American gallinules, that kind of thing. It's a big bird. Honey eaters are very typically Australian family, 50 odd members in Australia, ranging from tiny ones to small ones. This is the yellow-throated honey eater, and this is strong-billed honey eater. And one of the largest, if not the largest honey eater, is yellow wattlebird. You can see the yellow wattles just hanging down the side of its face there. There's also red wattlebird that occurs on the mainland that I've not got in this slideshow. It's very similar, but it has red wattles, slightly different shaped wattles as well. Probably not the most beautiful bird in Australia, it's fair to say. Dusky robin and also is a Tasmanian endemic. But Tasmania is also blessed with a few colourful robins. It's probably one of the best places to see pink robin in all of Australia. Very beautiful bird, often high up in the tree, but sometimes they come a bit lower down, give you a nice view. Flame robin. This one spends time in Tasmania and also in the south of Eastern Australia. And one of my favourites, scarlet robin. This one's a very beautiful bird. Out in the heathlands, some of the other little birds that we look for. This one is southern emu wren, and it's called an emu wren because if you can see the feathers that stick out for its tail that are probably twice as long as the bird itself, they're very similar look to an emu's feather, the filamentaceous feathers that emus have. So that's why they're called emu wrens. They're generally quite skulking birds of heathland. Sometimes I'll come and hop out and sit on the top of a bit of heather or heathland plants, banksia like this one, and display or call. And one of the most beautiful birds out there is called beautiful firetail. It's a finch, small finch. Very, very beautiful bird, well named. It's fairly common in some areas of Tasmania, and southeast of Australia as well, mainly coastal. And then we've got a couple of interesting mammals here. This one is an echidna, short-beaked echidna. It's one of a couple of monotreme mammals that occur in Australia. These are egg-laying mammals. This one you'll see is very, very furry. You can see the spikes sticking out. The echidnas in Tasmania, probably because it's colder than the rest of Australia, are much furrier than the echidnas further north. And I'll show you a slide of one of those, a more typical mainland example shortly. One of the other famous creatures on Tasmania is a Tasmanian devil. It's also very endangered, but some suggest that it might be increasing. They have found a new population on the island, so fingers crossed that we will get an increase in those in the future. And inshore bottlenose dolphins, you often see large pods of dolphins off Tasmania, which is very nice to see. Sometimes 200 or 300 of them chasing fish about. And then that kind of is Tasmania in a nutshell. You usually see over 100 species in 5 days in Tasmania, and a good portion of those are all of the endemics on Tasmania, it's about 15, and then lots of other Australian endemics. So we're going to hop over the Tasman Sea now to Victoria, and we're going to start in Melbourne, the capital of Victoria. You've probably seen that on the news recently because of the COVID issues there. It's all on lockdown, unfortunately. But we're going to get our first glimpse probably of kangaroos. This is what lots of people want to see when they come to Australia. There is more than one species of kangaroo. There are several species. This is eastern grey kangaroo. And probably the most sought after of Australia's mammals is the koala. It's an endangered species. After the fires last year, it's going to be even more endangered, unfortunately. They're absolutely incredible creatures. They just sit around and not do a lot. They're kind of similar to a sloth, I think, in some ways, but this is one of my favourite animals in the world. I enjoy seeing them all the time. This one, I'd been sat with a client trying to tease out some finches from some bushes, and looked up after about 15 minutes, and this koala's just been watching us the whole time, camouflaged against a tree there. So it was kind of cool to see. So we'll get on with some of the common birds of Australia here. Magpie lark, which is actually a flycatcher. Willy wagtail, that's not a wagtail, which is actually a fantail, which is also a kind of flycatcher. These birds are abundant everywhere. Crested pigeon, very common, but pretty good looking. This bird has actually expanded its range due to the urbanization of Australia, moving water around, providing water for it. This species requires water every day. So with the provision of dams and drainage, it provides water. So these birds have spread rapidly through most of Australia in the last 100 years. Laughing kookaburra. So I'm going to try something. I don't know if this sound will work. We'll try.
Oh, that is awesome. It came through, Andy.
So you either got sound or you got nothing. Good.
No, that was great.
So this is, to me, this is the sound of Australia. You can't beat, you're lying in your tent or your hotel room or whatever, and you hear that coming out from the bush. It's an amazing sound. It just makes you laugh. It makes me laugh every time I hear it. It's just a brilliant sound. I've had 6 lined up on phone wires before, all doing it. And this bird, and don't underestimate the size of it. This is like almost 50 centimeters, I think, kingfisher. It's a huge bird, and they go around marauding things. And the willy wagtail that I showed you, I've seen them, like, they will bomb and they will hit them on their head. They'll land on their back to chase them away, because these birds, although they're kingfishers, they don't eat fish. They will eat lizards, they will eat other birds, they will eat all sorts of things. They're incredible predators, and they are mobbed constantly because of it. But it is the sound of Australia to me. One of the birds that I really love and is always very popular is the fairy wren. Several fairy wrens, we'll go through a few of them on this talk. This is superb fairy wren. It's probably the most abundant, commonest, most well known of the fairy wrens. It occurs in people's gardens all through the cities in the east and out in the countryside a little bit. This one is not so common. It's a bit more restricted range. This is the diamond firetail, so related to the beautiful firetail that we showed you in Tasmania. And also another finch, sometimes called a firetail. This is red-browed finch. And then this is the Australian magpie. I do have the call for this one as well, so let's see if this one works. So that's also one of the most beautiful sounds, I think, from Australia. You hear that on in early mornings, just over the nice cool mornings before it gets too hot, and you just hear that floating over the forest. It's a really nice call, and that's a common bird throughout Australia as well. Probably one of my favourite birds in Australia is actually this one, the New Holland honeyeater. Australia used to be called New Holland, and a lot of the birds have got Novo Hollande in their scientific name, and that's all because of that. This is New Holland honeyeater, very aggressive bird. Looks nice, but will chase everything off your garden. So another fairly common urban bird and found throughout the country is tawny frogmouth. This one's on a nest. These are big birds as well. They're big chunky frogmouths. Rainbow lorikeet, probably one of the commonest parrots in Australia. And there are several parrots that we can see quite easily around the city. This is red-rumped parrot, a very small bird actually. Galah, very, very common, found across most of the country. Very noisy, loud birds when they fly around, but not as loud as the sulphur-crested cockatoo. They're pretty aggressive birds, and when they land, they put their crest up like that, which is pretty cool to see there. I mean, that's a big bird as well. Smaller, but more difficult to see is the gang cockatoo. It's got these little wispy red crest on the top of its head there. So Southern Australia, Victoria particularly, is very good for wetland birds as well. So we'll just dive in. No one really likes ducks, I know, but I'm going to just do a quick stop because there's some nice birds. And we'll get back to some proper birds in a minute. So black swan, Cape barren goose, very, very interesting bird for a goose. I mean, it looks a lot like some of the geese that you get down in southern South America. Freckled duck is actually an ancient duck, one of the original ducks. There's been some work done on that, and it goes back a long, long way. Australian shelduck, quite beautiful. This is a female. And then pink-eared duck. This one, it's very difficult to see the pink. It's a tiny little pink dot just above the eye. It used to be called zebra duck. And to be honest, zebra duck might actually be a more helpful name than pink-eared duck. You don't often see the pink ear in the field. It's got an absolutely ginormous bill, and it actually feeds a little bit like a phalarope, if you're familiar with the phalaropes spinning around foraging. One of the pretty ducks is the chestnut teal. This is the male, nice green head and chestnut body. This is the black-tailed native hen, also known as turbo chuck. These are absolutely incredible birds. I can do a tour and I can see maybe 500 at a lake, and I'll go back there next year, there'll be none. And I can go in the outback and there'll be none, and then it will have rained, and then suddenly there's flocks of like 5,000 out there. They're amazing birds. They often run rather than fly, but they clearly can fly because they will fly several thousand kilometers into the outback to breed when the conditions are right. So they're pretty cool birds. And then the Australian crake, formerly Australian spotted crake. It's had a bit of a name change. Unusual for crakes, these ones actually walk out in the open and show quite nicely, which is good. Hoary-headed grebe is also fairly common in the southeast. And then brolga, that's fairly obviously a crane, type of crane. Not too common, but not too uncommon. And then Australian pelican is generally one of the first birds you see when you get to Australia. They sit around fairly obviously on the street lights in some of the cities. Huge birds, absolutely massive bill, even by pelican standards. And a few shorebirds here, pied oystercatcher, sooty oystercatcher. A few obvious differences between those two make it fairly easy to identify them. Beautiful red-capped plover. It's found on beaches, sandy areas and salt lakes. and black-fronted dotterel. It's a fairly widespread bird that can occur anywhere in that part of the world. All these birds provide some food for the raptors as well, and this is black-shouldered kite, fairly similar to the white-tailed kite you get in America and black wing kite you get through Africa. Whistling kite, this one, it's a fairly common bird throughout most of Australia. And white-bellied sea eagle, absolute monster of a bird, massive bird found from India all the way through Southeast Asia and down into Australia. Had a nice one, Flores, flying over my hotel last weekend as well, which was nice. And then we're going to move inland. So we're going to change from the wetlands and the coast to some different habitats. We're going to hit some mallee and mulga habitats, different types of eucalyptus trees. These are some river gums along a river that's typically dry for most of the year or dry for multiple years at a time. So we bird along these kind of areas, and these areas might hold a little bit of water, have some greenery and keep some birds. Also quite good for reptiles out there. This is the eastern bearded dragon. Was not too happy, it almost got trodden on. This is a stumpy-tailed lizard, or shingleback is my favourite reptile. This is the first reptile I ever saw in Australia. Just incredible dinosaur type thing, and they actually feel like pine cones as well. They have this little stumpy toe, you can see where the thumb is. So it's also known as stumpy-tailed lizard or shingleback. Really, really cool creature. And then the blue-tongue lizard that has a habit of sticking his tongue out if you get too closely and jumping up on his back feet. So try and avoid getting bitten by that. Some of the birds that we go and see for out here, and this is one of the prime targets, is mallee fowl. This is one of 3 mound nesting species. The male looks after the mound, builds this huge mound in the soil. The female lays the eggs, and the male monitors the nest every day, regulating the temperature by opening up the mound, closing the mound, keeping rid of predators like snakes and cats and foxes, unfortunately. A tough bird to see. There's a few areas where it persists. And we'll see the other 2 mound nesting species as we go through further north. Great for parrots again out here. This is the Australian ringneck, several different species of this throughout the country. Mulga parrot, very beautiful bird, smaller than the ringneck. One of the most spectacular is the Major Mitchell's cockatoo, also known as pink cockatoo. It has this slightly pink flush there that you can kind of see in this picture. A couple of other birds that are possible in the east of Australia. They're commoner in the centre, but you do get stragglers out in the east. And this is cockatiel, very familiar, I'm sure, for everyone, as is budgerigar, budgie. It's always pretty impressive to see flocks of both of those last 2 species in the wild. One of the most sought by Australian birders is the scarlet-chested parrot, a rare nomadic species, as are a lot of these birds, to be honest. This is an absolutely stunning coloured bird. It's just pretty much mind-blowing when you see one of these fly, and they just glow. Swallows out here in the dry country, white-backed swallow. And we're going to get a few more colourful birds now. This is the red-capped robin, small bird of the interior. This is purple-backed fairy wren. There's a male on the left and a female on the right. He's doing a bit of display to her. Most of the male fairy wrens are beautiful like this, and then the females are drab like that. There's one fairy wren in the north, the lovely fairy wren that's the female is actually very attractive, and possibly more so than the male. This is one of the best looking birds, I think, in Australia, the splendid fairy wren. There's 3 subspecies of this bird that may actually be separate species eventually. They're quite different, but they just glow. And they're pretty impressive birds. And then this is an example of some of the spinifex habitat that we kind of look around, and some of these birds are adapted just to this. And one such bird is the mallee emu wren. This is also critically endangered. There's only a few hundred of these left in the world probably now. You can see the emu-like tail that you could see on the southern emu wren. This bird is very restricted in Australia to probably only 2 or 3 sites now, so very susceptible to fire damage, unfortunately, and drought. They don't move very far. Now this bird is a crimson chat, and it's actually a honey eater, or part of a honey eater family, and they move around in big nomadic flocks, as do orange chats that are also nomadic and go in big flocks, or you can just get the odd one turn up here and there, both pretty colourful birds. And also in this habitat is the chestnut quail thrush, which is a very interesting family of birds. They behave a bit like a thrush, a bit like a quail, walking around on the ground, have a very high-pitched call that not everyone can hear because of the pitch of the call. Another beautiful songbird actually that you hear in the outback and the bush in the morning is the crested bellbird here. Some people treat this as a monotypic family, so it's always an interesting one to see. I don't think I can call them another stunning bird, otherwise they're all stunning birds. But this is rainbow bee-eater, and it is pretty gorgeous bird. It's very popular when people see this bird in nice light. This bird actually overwinters in Indonesia. I saw some in Flores last weekend that are spending the Australian winter in Indonesia, and then they'll fly back down to Australia, and they will breed down in Australia. Some birds stay in Australia year round, but it's the only bee-eater you get in Australia, actually, so it does make bee-eater identification easy. Emu, you'll all be familiar with emu, so here's a close-up of a shot of an emu head. Maybe less well known is the Australian owlet nightjar. This bird roosts by day in holes, and it has a series of holes that it uses, little bolt holes. If it gets chased off by something trying to eat it, like a lizard, it will fly out and go into another hole, and this is what they look like out of the hole. They can be tricky to connect with at night because you don't get the eye shine off them like you would off owls and other nightjars when you go out looking for them. Also, when we're out at night, you come across stubble quail. But the prime reason for going out at night in a small patch of northern Victoria and southern New South Wales is this one, plains wanderer, critically endangered again. Its closest relative is actually thought to be the seed snipes in South America. So it takes a bit of getting your head around that fact. Also possible at night, if you're very lucky and you've had rain, is the crucifix toad. And if I move it on, you can see the cross on the back of the toad there. This toad spends about 60% of its life underground. So we were very, very lucky to see this one after we'd had about an inch of rain suddenly overnight, and suddenly this and several other rare species were hopping about. Back to the birds in the outback, in the drier habitats. Australian bustard, and the only bustard in Australia, so it makes identification fairly simple on that one. This is a big bird. And some raptors as well. Spotted harrier, wedge-tailed eagle, huge bird, like the golden eagle, but with an incredible silhouette of a wedge tail when it's flying about. Also pretty unique when it's flying about, the letter-winged kite, so a relative of the black-shouldered, black-winged, white-tailed kite, but this is pretty much ghostly white with a big black M when the wings are at a slightly different angle to where I've got it here. This is a rare outback bird that is pretty much crepuscular, big eyes, and that's a boom and bust species depending on the rodent year. This is an absolutely huge mammal. This is red kangaroo. This is one of the bluer types of red kangaroo. This is, 2 meters or something tall and packs a big punch. Usually they just run away, unfortunately. But they're really impressive to see when you're out in the bush. And then out into the drier habitat, when you leave the trees behind, you get into this surface of Mars looking area. This is gibber, gibber plains, which is like a red stony desert where you can drive and look for a few very specialist birds. Now, it's not a very good picture. I apologize for some of these pictures. I'm not a photographer. This is a gibber bird, sometimes called gibber chat. It's in the left there. I mean, it shows how difficult they can be. If you look at the back, it blends in very well with the rocks there. These are technically honey eaters. They're chats that are part of the honey eater family still. And you get those out in the desert there. Australian pratincoal. This actually has really long legs for a pratincoal, and that's because it's often in the stony deserts, so it needs to have the extra height because of the stones, and then it keeps its body up off the heat of the ground as well. You often see birds sat on cowpats or little bits, just anything that gives them a little bit of height. One of the other birds we look for out in this outback area is inland dotterel. And then in the sand dunes itself, you get the Aryan grass wren, named after the lake basin in that area. Grass wrens are typically an endemic family to Australia, and very, very difficult birds to see often. They're quite shy and secretive. But the outback area is excellent for reptiles as well. This is a knob-tailed gecko. You can just about see its little knob on the end of its tail. It's got a big knob on the front of its head, to be honest. It's probably a knob-headed gecko, would probably be a better name for it, but there we go. This one is a mulga snake, or a king brown snake. This is pretty much deadly. There's some pretty deadly snakes in Australia. There's areas in the outback of bitumen roads, and these are just excellent for going and looking for reptiles, because the reptiles seem to just be attracted to them like magnets. So you go out there at night and you can find all sorts of really cool reptiles. This is a death adder. It's common name is common death adder, but it's not common, so it's a rare sighting to actually see one. Small, powerful snake. And then we're gonna head back out of the outback into some more temperate forest, I guess is probably the way around here now. So we're going to shoot back round, and we're going to head into some forest, different habitats, different birds. In these swampy foresty areas, you can look for Lewin's rail, a very rare bird and difficult to see out in the open. So nice view there. Little birds as well, rose robin and eastern yellow robin here. This one's fairly common and widespread over most of eastern Australia. Brown tree creeper. This species and the next species kind of fill the role of nuthatches. Although it's a brown tree creeper, it's not related to the creepers that you get in Australia or we get in Europe. This is a different family of birds. And this is varied citella that kind of looks a bit like a nuthatch and behaves a bit like a nuthatch, but it's a separate thing. And there's several different subspecies of varied citella, and some of them are very, very different looking as well. We see those in the different parts of Australia, such as North Australia and West Australia. This is a crested shrike tit. It looks a bit like a tit from Europe and a bit like a shrike from the Northern Hemisphere. Peels off the bark with its very large beak, and that often gives it its presence away. You hear it ripping the bark off the trees. Another beautiful songster, common bird across most of Australia, is the Australian golden whistler. And then there's a couple of spectacular parrots as well in this region. This is turquoise parrot and superb parrot. This bird is restricted to a very small area in New South Wales and Victoria border areas. So we always call in and look for those because they're pretty beautiful birds. Restricted range. Several honey eaters as well in this zone. There's eastern spinetail, very thin, long bill, and painted honey eater. This bird's a mistletoe specialist. And then one of the main birds of this kind of habitat is the superb lyrebird, and this is a very well-known bird. It's a very good mimic. It can mimic multiple species of birds, but there are lots of mechanical noises as well. It's the largest passerine in the world. This is the superb lyrebird. We also look for Albert's lyrebird a little bit later as well. And this is it doing its display here. They have a clear area and they flick their tails around. For a large bird, they can be very shy and very secretive, so they take a bit of skill to get close to sometimes. And also one of the final bird in this habitat, powerful owl. This is the largest ninox, which is hawk owl in the world. Often you find them roosting with a possum or their prey from the previous night, so they have a meal before they go off and hunt the next night. This is a big bird, big body, but a fairly small head on it. And the great thing is about these birds is you can sometimes find them in and around the cities of Brisbane, Melbourne, and Sydney as well. They change their roosting sites every few days, but if you know the roosting sites, you've got a good chance of finding those pretty impressive birds. And wombat, common wombat, that is one of the cool mammals that you get in this kind of habitat. And what's interesting about the common wombat? It's not going to show it. Hold on, I've got a bit of a glitch. It's not going to show it. Never mind. That's annoying. The wombat has square poo, and there should be a picture of some square poo pop up, but for some reason it's not popped up. So anyway, we'll do without that, but you can imagine it. It's about 1 inch squared, and you see this square poo as you're walking around the forest, and you're like, what on earth is from that from? And it's actually from a wombat. It's kind of unique. So we're going to fly up quickly to Brisbane, and we just do a couple of days in Brisbane area. Some excellent mangrove forest there. And one of the specialists there is a Teresian kingfisher. It's been split from a collared kingfisher complex throughout Asia. There's several other endemic birds that we go for there, mangrove honeyeater and mangrove gerygony, a few other pieces. This is the pied butcherbird, one of the American and Australian crow type family butcherbirds. Spotless crake, this is far shyer than the spotted crake, but they're about there. And a couple of fairy wrens as well. This is variegated fairy wren. It's now got a very narrow strip of its distribution. And red-backed fairy wren. This is more widespread through the north. And a few finches as well. Double-barred finches are a fairly common bird around that part of around Brisbane. Then we're going to go up into the mountains just south of Brisbane. And if anyone's been to Australia, fair chance you've been to this next place. This is O'Reilly's. It is one of my favourite places in Australia. It's got some absolutely beautiful habitat. The birds are incredibly difficult to find there. This is Australian king parrot. I had to work very hard to see those ones. This is me in my slightly thinner days when I was working in Australia. This is the crimson rosella here. This is a common bird that flies around the lodge. Australian brush turkey. This is the second of our mound nesting birds. And then some pretty spectacular birds again that you get good views at O'Reilly's. This is satin bowerbird. And this is the male satin bowerbird at his display lek. You can see little twigs behind him. He's put those there like that. That's not natural. He's built that little arena and then he's decorated it with all of the blue things that he can find. Unfortunately, these days it often involves lots of plastic, but sometimes you find them with blue berries and blue flowers and blue leaves and things like that. And one of the nicer looking bowerbirds, this is regent bowerbird. It is fairly common around the lodge that we stay in the gardens there, and they sometimes come onto your balcony if you're loose with your bananas and oranges. Some other birds that we find in this area, black-faced monarch. It's a flycatcher. white-headed pigeon. And glossy black cockatoo, this is an endangered species as well with a very limited range. This actually specialises in a certain tree that is found in that general area, but it's not a common bird. This is a common bird. This is grey shrike thrush. And then eastern whipbird, both common, but this one's a skulking bird usually, but at O'Reilly's it tends to show very well, used to people. Russet-tailed thrush, one of the very nice pair of thrushes that you get in that area. The other being Bassian thrush. Noisy pitter, thereabouts in O'Reilly's, especially after it's rained, you'll get those. One of the specialities as well of O'Reilly's is the Australian log runner. They spend a lot of time scuttling around on the ground, flipping leaves out with their feet and getting the insects. Similar to the superb lyrebird, this is Albert's lyrebird. Probably not as good looking as the superb lyrebird, but it's much more restricted in range. It's only found in a couple of areas in Australia. Paradise riflebird. So this is the first chance you're going to get of getting a bird of paradise on the tour. And this is Paradise riflebird, and they're around the O'Reilly's area in the rainforest there. This is a display perch, and then this one feeding. They peer behind bark and they pull bark off, and they get grubs from behind the moss and the bark. Big birds. Nice to start seeing the birds of paradise, and then we get another bird of paradise, another riflebird further north as well on this tour. And this is an echidna. This is a short-beaked echidna again, but this is further north now. So this one does not have so much fur. So you see more of the spikes on this one. It's usually in warmer climates. A few other mammals that we get in this area. This is red-necked wallaby and red-necked paddy melon. It's good for spotlighting up at O'Reilly's at night. There's lots of really cool creatures out there. This is short-eared brush-tailed possum. We also get common brush-tailed possum and common ring-tailed possum out at nights there. Lots of frogs. This is Stony Creek frog. Good for reptiles as well. This is the eastern carpet python. This has just probably eaten one of the paddy melons, to be honest. This was just around the lodge, having a bit of a siesta. Lots of geckos as well. This is the southern spotted velvet gecko. You see walking through a bit of a burnt area there. And the southern leaf-tailed gecko. Very prehistoric looking creatures. Yeah, so that's a very, very brief stop in Brisbane because it's, we spend probably 3 nights there, I think, before flying up to the far north Queensland. So this area, we're going to go into Cairns, it's the capital of this part of Australia. We're going to spend some time in the different habitats up there. Different forest, wet, paperbark, swampy forests up there, amazing beaches, lots of new birds just around the cities, in the towns. This is the fig bird, Australasian fig bird. It's a type of old world oriole, and there's 3 different orioles that are possible in this area: yellow oriole and olive-backed oriole. Spangled drongo is there, like a fly-catching bird. And then our third of the mound nesters, orange-footed scrubfell. This bird can build a mound that can be, I've seen them at probably 15 meters long and 4 or 5 meters tall. They're pretty incredible. And then a few of the other birds. This is bush stone curlew, so it's a type of thickney, similar to double-striped thickney from Central America, same family. And this is the beach stone curlew, much more scarce than the previous bird. Some pretty cool pigeons as well. This is Teresian imperial pigeon. More tropical birds up here. Raja shelduck that you often see in New Guinea and northern central Australia. It does reach a few parts of northern Queensland. Magpie goose, a bit of a black and white theme going on just there, those 3 birds. plumed whistling duck, one of a couple of whistling duck species that you get up in that part of Australia. Really impressive flanks on these birds. And you can get flocks of thousands of them on some of the water bodies that we go to, which is a really impressive sight and sound, especially when the raptor, like the white-bellied seagull, flies over the lake that they're all on, and they all take to the air. It's like a thunderclap with the wings and then the screaming from the calls. It's pretty impressive. A few of the other smaller birds that we might get in this area, double-eyed fig parrot. It's probably about the size of your hand. It's a tiny little bird. Also very, very small is the little kingfisher, probably Australia's most difficult kingfisher to come across of those. Barred cuckoo shrike is a typically frugivorous bird, and it's usually a flocking species. So sometimes you find flocks of them, 20, 30. Other times they're on their own. It's a very attractive bird for a cuckoo shrike. There's several other species of cuckoo shrike we see on the tour. This is probably the most difficult of them. Even with the small theme, this is little bronze cuckoo. It's again probably not much bigger than your hand. White-breasted wood swallow, common bird of the north, one of half a dozen wood swallow species that you get in Australia that are generally fairly nomadic, most of them. This one seems to be more sedentary in its nature. In the water area here, we get Nankeen night heron, which is very nice looking bird with that reddish brown colour. One of the top targets actually is great billed heron. It's a very rare bird and globally, and in Australia it's restricted to a few spots. We take a mangrove boat trip to go and look for this one, where we see lots of very good birds, lots of fruit doves and usually frogmouths, and this is one of the key targets here. It's a huge bird, and this one's just hulking down, so it does look a lot smaller than it is in reality. Grey goshawk is one of the raptors here. This one's actually feeding on a roadkill wallaby, which I've never seen them do that before. It's a nice view of it anyway. So this is Cairns Esplanade. This area here, I've not put loads of shorebird pictures on, but there's loads of shorebirds out here. You know, far eastern curlews, whimbrels, godwits, great knots, sharp-tailed sandpipers, lots of grey plovers, lots of shorebirds possible out here, and terns during the right season. So we spend a lot of time just walking along here, looking at the shorebirds. But then we also go out onto the Barrier Reef, and this is one of the most impressive places in Australia, and people enjoy this day immensely. We go out and we look on Michaelmas Cay at the nesting shorebirds, seabirds. Here, lots of sooty terns and brown noddies. They make up the bulk of the species here. This is a sooty tern. You also get bridled tern out here as well. This is a young sooty tern. A brown noddy. It's very, very hot out on this sandy cay, so we spend as long as we need to get views of all the birds and photograph them all, but it does get quite hot out here. The only vegetation is the bits of twigs that the birds are brought in to nest, like this brown booby. Good for seeing great frigate birds as well out here. They often get mobbed by the other birds. Pretty impressive place on the small cay. However, it's really the underwater stuff here that really blows people away. It's highly recommended to do some snorkeling as a minimum out here. It's phenomenal. This is clownfish, striped surgeonfish, many spotted sweetlips. These are just a few. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of fish out here, and to be honest, some of the fish rival the fruit doves and beautiful birds of Australia. They're absolutely incredible looking. And to get a chance to swim with a green turtle as well is pretty special. Yeah, you don't really want to swim with one of these saltwater crocodiles. Luckily, they're not around that part. These are a little bit further north, but they do occur in Australia as we head further north. Just watch where you end up sunbathing on a beach, basically. So we're going to just do our final little stint around this inland bit of Australia in the north. And there's a mix of very, very dry habitat here and then some pockets of rainforest. And so we'll go through the dry bit first. And this is where we find birds like squatter pigeon, a very terrestrial pigeon. Blue-winged kookaburra. So this is as big as the laughing kookaburra, but it's found in the dry parts of Australia. Really piercing pale eye and big blue wings. Not as cool song either. This is another rare bird. This is black-throated finch, only found in a few areas of Australia these days. And crimson finch as well. This is black-bellied subspecies here. Let's talk about splitting crimson finches from the ones in Asia. Another bowerbird here. This is not as attractive probably as the two that we see down in O'Reilly's, but it's huge. This is the largest bowerbird. This is Great Bowerbird. And this one decorates its bower with shells, anything bleached basically. But it does throw the odd colour, and you can see possibly that it's actually stood on a green chili pepper. This individual was raiding a little primary school vegetable patch, and it was stealing the colourful chili peppers off their plants and popping it in its bower, along with various pencils and pencil crayons from the school playground that it was picking up. This one's quite a famous bower. Also chanced out here for dingo, the Australian wild dog, probably brought across by the first people who came to Australia thousands of years ago. Into the rainforest finally, we can see some pretty cool creatures. This is the curtain fig, a very famous tree in Australia. It's actually got a boardwalk all the way around it because it's so big and it's a tourist attraction in its own right. But it's great for birding and wildlife. And sometimes, if you're very, very lucky, you might get this, which is a kangaroo in a tree. It's called Lumholtz's tree kangaroo. One of a couple of tree kangaroos you get in Australia. There are several other pretty interesting creatures that come out at night up here, and it's great for going out at night to see lots of animals. This is a striped possum coming to some feed that's been put out for it. And then we've got a sugar glider on the left here, a tiny little creature, and then slightly bigger is the squirrel glider. These animals are found in this area. And some pretty impressive reptiles as well. This is the Boyd's forest dragon. Chameleon gecko that's only found around one tiny little speck of Australia at one of the crater lakes there. Very, very difficult to get. This is a jungle carpet python. This one is a lace monitor. It's quite a large individual. It's one of the Varanus dragons, as they're often known. Good for amphibians. White-lipped tree frog. You might get this one in your toilet bowl or your shower. And some pretty horrible spiders. This is a mouse spider, a bit like a trapdoor type thing. This is the main creature that people want to see though when they come up here. This is the platypus. This is a second of our monotremes, so egg-laying mammals. It's a incredibly weird creature. There's no way about saying that otherwise. It's, you know, it's got a face that looks like a duck. It's got a tail that looks like a beaver or something, and it's yeah, interesting creature. It's got a claw that can poison you as well if you ever would get one. I don't know how you could ever do that, but yeah, they're often out late in the evening and in streams, and we've got a good sight for those, so always get good views of those. Difficult to get a photo of though because they're often underwater mainly. But there are a few pretty spectacular birds here that I'm going to end up with. Final few birds. This is another bowerbird. This is golden bowerbird. I'm just going to try the call on this one. So as you can hear for that, it makes a very interesting electrically current sound. This is a very restricted range species, as are some of these other birds here. This is a chowchilla related to the log runner that I showed you earlier. It flicks out the leaves as well, but these are much fatter, bigger, fatter birds. Spotted catbird. I don't have the call for that one down here actually, but it does sound a bit like a cat screaming. Often in the canopy, but this one dropped down to say hello. This is yellow-breasted boatbill. It's a flycatcher that you get in Australia and New Guinea as well. Another fantail. This is Rufous fantail. This is probably one of the prettiest fantails. We have blue-faced parrotfinch here. This is another restricted range bird, probably one of the most difficult of the Queensland specialities to get. Lesser sooty owl. These have some pretty scary sounds when they call at night. It's like a firework going off and then someone's screaming, which is always fun when you're out in the forest on your own. Also out at night is the Papuan frogmouth. And then the final two birds I'm going to show you, probably the two most sought. This is the buff-breasted paradise kingfisher. This is a kingfisher that migrates from New Guinea, comes to Australia, to northern Queensland to breed during the wet season of Australia. It nests in termite mounds and is often seen fighting with the noisy pitter over the best territory that they can have. They're pretty spectacular birds again. And so they're present in Australia from probably mid-November time onwards before they head back to New Guinea after breeding. The final bird, though, is my favourite bird in the world and the bird that gets me the most excited every time I see it. Southern cassowary. This is the male here with two chicks that you can see on the below the male there. Stripy little birds. These are like looking at dinosaurs in my opinion. They've got very interesting feathers, huge feet, big casque on their heads. They can kill you if they wanted to, you know. You don't get between a cassowary and its chicks. You have to be very sensible around them. You have to give them a lot of respect. But the thrill of seeing a cassowary is just amazing. They're big. They're, you know, 1.5 meters tall, I would imagine. Unfortunately, they're endangered. The biggest issue for cassowary is cars. Getting hit on the road is a big issue. And dogs, pet dogs, is probably another issue. They attack them, and it's a species that is holding on in Australia, but I don't know how much longer it will hold on for. It's an absolutely spectacular bird, another spectacular bird, unfortunately. It's very, very nice to see and is probably one of the most popular birds on the tour. And I shall leave you with a close-up of the face of one of those. And yeah, thank you if there's anyone still listening. Hopefully the slideshow worked and you all saw something of interest. And yeah, thanks very much.
Andy, that was awesome. I don't even know what to say. Like, there's so much cool stuff there. I think that was amazing. It really was.
Awesome.
We do have a few questions. I have a lot of questions myself, but we'll stick to the questions from the participants.
Okay.
How about how's the birding in New South Wales after the fires from last year?
Yeah, I was actually there during the fires last year. I spend a lot of time in Australia usually. This year I'm not, unfortunately, because of the coronavirus. But yeah, essentially the birding's fine in the majority of areas. A lot of the areas I go birding in have not been impacted by the fires. There will undoubtedly be some areas that have been destroyed, but the Australian ecosystems have developed, evolved with fire for centuries, thousands of years. the indigenous people have been burning landscapes as a way of opening up areas to encourage kangaroos to come out into the open so they can hunt them. So a lot of the plants have actually evolved mechanisms to seed and grow after fire. So even within a few weeks of the fire going through an area, there will be plants coming back to life. So I wouldn't be overly concerned, to be honest. The area where you see fires causing big issues is where non-native plants have been planted around the city, or plantations of conifer trees, pine trees that they're using for pulp, for paper and what have you. When a fire goes through there, those trees have no natural regeneration. So the birds, the plants just die, and they're just left there until someone chops them down. So as regards, now going after fires from last year, I think it will be fine in most areas.
Yeah, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
What time of the year is best to go on one of these tours?
Really, Australia is good from September through to December is probably the key time. After December, it gets very hot until maybe March, April time. Most of our tour, the tour that I've done on this talk, for example, is timed late October to mid-November, and that's timed so that you're in Tasmania for when those orange-bellied parrots get back onto their breeding ground, because they arrive into Tasmania to start breeding in late October. So if you're there before late October, you're not going to get those orange-bellied parrots. And if you go to, say, northern Queensland before mid-November, you're not going to get the paradise kingfisher, because that doesn't arrive until the 12th or 13th of November. So our tours are timed for those key birds, but then also you've got to consider the weather. I mean, after December, you're talking 40 degrees centigrade in the outback, and it's pretty unbearable. Mm-hmm. It's like being in an oven a lot of the time. So that's the best time, sort of September, October, November, December.
Sounds good. We had a question about what's your favorite Australian field guide?
Oh, the new field guide that came out. It's called the Australian Bird Guide. It's by far and away the best field guide. It's not a field guide. It's too big, basically. That's the one. Yeah, Bob's got it there.
Oh,
Australian Bird. Oh, and it's there by Tom. Definitely. Oh, I hope people haven't been
You both have it.
These Americans fact checking me as I'm going. Yeah, that's the best guide by far. It's heavy, it's big, it won't fit in a pocket, but it's the one-stop shop for birds in Australia. There are several apps, and there is a good app that I use. The illustrations in it are woeful, but it's got the sound recordings, and that's helpful when you're over there or trying to learn those calls. I think it's the Morecambe app is the name of it. That's a good app for learning the calls. But that book, I mean, it's not perfect. For example, it gives wing length rather than body length, which is kind of hard when you're trying to learn a bird. And there's the second or third issue of that will be even better, I think.
Awesome. Well, yeah. I think those were the main questions we had. Maybe if we want to take a couple questions, if anyone else has a question, you can unmute yourself or raise your hand. I was really impressed by the pink-eared duck. I think that's the one that I want to see the most out of all those. I'm big into waterfowl, but that pink-eared duck really stood out to me.
Yeah, it's a really interesting bird, because I've been camping in the desert, in the outback, in the middle of nowhere, probably 2,000 kilometers from anywhere, in the middle of nowhere, and at night, and you hear them flying over, and they're flying around looking for water. It's an amazing thing, really, to think of. And a lot of these birds, the pelicans, they will fly into the middle of Australia to go and breed, and they know when there's water in the lakes, and they fly out there and they breed, and it's incredible. It really is.
Wow. Any last questions before we head out?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, can we join part way on a tour, Andrew, or do we have to take the whole thing?
So we've got 4 tours in Australia. There's the Tasmania that's a week long, and then there's the East Coast tour that's just over 2 weeks. Then we have a 9 or 10 day Northern Territory tour, and then after that we've got it's about a 10-day Southwest Australian tour. Now, I've not touched on the birds of Northern Australia or Western Australia. There's a bit of overlap between what I've talked about here, but then there's a whole load of regional endemics and different birds in those areas as well. I could quite easily do another hour talk on those. So you can do, I mean, we have people some years that do Tasmania and the East Coast. We have people that come and do just the East Coast, or we have people that do the East Coast and the North. I'm mixing them around a little bit. From this year, I'm not going to be doing any tours there, unfortunately, because of the virus. Next year, we'll be doing the tours. We've got people booked on those already. And 2022, I will just move them around slightly, but they'll be around the same kind of time. So yes, you can do, say, the East Coast tour if you just wanted to do the East Coast. You could break the East Coast up, and we could, get you on half of the East Coast tour if you've already done some of the area. We could do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just
my question.
Email and ask. Yeah. Sorry, Bob.
That was my question. Sorry to interrupt. That was my question. Can you do just New South Wales and Victoria rather than the entire East Coast tour? Because I've done Queensland, at least Eastern Queensland, and I have not done further south. And so I would be interested in combining Tasmania and New South Wales, Victoria.
Yeah, we have done that in the past, and we could probably work out something where we could do a Tasmanian Victoria tour, do that. I mean, if there was a group of people, we could do a specific, Southern Australia tour quite easily. We could do a tour where you did Tasmania and Victoria, and put something like that together for you. Or
we can't speak for the group, but that would be my.
We could do that, or as individuals, if you got in touch with us and said, look, you've already been to this part of Australia, but you'd like to join the Tasmania and the southern part of the East Coast, then we could probably work out something, I'm sure.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Andy, I just want to tell you, thank you so much. I think all of us really enjoyed that. The birds there are just amazing. And not to mention all the mammals and everything. It was just really mind-blowing to see something so different.
Yeah, I usually get on the combine those tours, probably around 450 species, between 400 and 450 species, depending on the actual year, and how the people want to go for it. Usually get about 40 species of mammal and 20 species of reptile, but it would be easy to up the reptiles by actually putting in more effort at night, because a lot of the mammals and reptiles are nocturnal. And I usually say to my clients, I'm gonna go out and look for stuff tonight. If you want to come, you can come. If not, don't feel obliged to, because some people don't care about the other animals. I do, so I go out and look for it. Some people are just, I want to see the birds and then I want to go to bed. So that's fine. Which is, people do that. I don't mind. But then I say, I'm going out regardless. If people want to come with me, come with me. That's great. And that's a way of increasing the number of mammals and reptiles as well. There's a lot of quality animals to go and find out there.
That's great. That's the best way to do it. That's a good trip leader right there. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, hey, thank you, Edie. And I just want to say, Birding Ecotours is a great partner of Tucson Audubon and the Southeast Arizona Birding Festival. look forward to someday meeting you in person, Andy. But until then, we get to talk through Zoom, and appreciate you being here. We're a half hour over our time, so there's only 30 people left. We did have 80 plus, which was awesome. So I'm gonna unmute everyone, and then I'll send out the recording tomorrow morning to everyone.
Awesome. Thank you very much, everyone. Just a couple of quick questions I just saw come up. Just briefly, a maximum 8 people on the tours. We do small groups, unless you had your own group. You know, as a bird club group, we could do whatever you wanted. But all of our tours are small group tours. You know, we would run a tour with 3 or 4 people up to 8. And I do a lot of private tours as well, where, you know, I have a client who wants to do 6 weeks in Australia, and I take them around looking for their target list of birds. So we do that as well. And just so that if Chris is watching this, I don't get told off, we have got the 5% discount on tours at the moment, booked until the end of August. And we're actually doing a community guide fund. We're trying to raise $10,000 for local guides around the world. And so we're about almost $5,000 of that now. So if you book a tour in the next couple of weeks before the end of August, you'll get 5% discount, and then 5% of that tour cost will also go to the guide fund as well. So be helping local guides who are definitely in need at the moment. So yeah, and if you've got any questions, please just email through. Luke's got my email address, and he'll be able to forward them on, and my email address might even be on some of the communication you've got. But I'll send you through maybe some links as well for you to have a look at. And any questions, please let me know, and I hope to see some of you out there birding in Australia with me.
Awesome job, Andy.
So
Awesome job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A good reminder, I'll put all of that information that Andy just shared in the email tomorrow. And Andy, if you have anything specific you'd really like me to put in there, send that over to me, and then I'll send it out tomorrow morning. And also include the Birding Ecotours link and all that good stuff there too. So
Thank you very much. Perfect.
yeah, thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
everyone.
All right,
Thanks,
see you
Luke.
later, everyone.
Bye-bye.